Indeed, it is a long wait, as Sam Gituku has mentioned there. But it is frustrating for the country as we watch and wait for the outcome of this search process. And a number of the questions that came up in the event of this tragedy is, who is responsible for your safety at sea? Which body is responsible for ensuring that every time you are on that ferry or indeed any other water vessel on any territorial waters in this country, who is in charge of search and rescue? Is it the Navy? Is it the Marine Police? Is it the Kenya Maritime Authority? The Kenya Ports Authority? Who is it? Well, before we even get to that, I'd like us to just take a look at what measures have been put in place for safety in this country. It starts with this one. It's called the International Convention of Life at Sea. It is an international maritime treaty which sets the basic minimum safety standards in the construction, equipment, and operation of ships across the world. It has about 164 member states that have signed this and ratified it into Kenyan law. This law was actually made way back in 1974. We ratified it all the way back then. In addition to this law, Kenya has also signed an MOU with all nations that are sharing the Indian Ocean to share information. Which vessel have you used? Which one has had an accident before? Which one is coming into your territorial waters? So these are countries like Madagascar, Seychelles, Mauritius, Perth, and they share information on all of these vessels and the status of their safety. Now, of course, all of that is then done by the Kenya Maritime Authority that is ensuring that all of these vessels meet the required safety standards. They do what is called port state control and flag state control. Now, port state control is just talking about all the ships and vessels that come into Kenya's territory, be they international or wherever. They're checking, do they have the fire extinguishers? Do they have trained staff? Do they have personal safety and social responsibility, personal safety techniques, crowd control? And then, of course, there's the flag state control, which is taking a look at all local vessels. Now, this is where I want us to come to, because in the wake of these questions as to who is responsible in the event of a search and rescue operation, do you remember the launch of this, the Kenya Coast Guard Services, in 2018, last year, October? In fact, it was launched by the president of this country just before the Blue Economy Conference, if you recall. This was done in Mombasa. Now, there is a law that puts it in place, which is the Kenya Coast Guard Services Act of 2018. It is responsible for a number of issues in the country, including security within all territorial waters within the country, including those 12 nautical miles outside the Kenya waters, including economic activities, fishing, making sure that no illegal fishing is being done. But this is what is most important for the purposes of our explainer tonight. It says, Section 8(1)(I), that the service, that's the Kenya Coast Guard Service, shall be deployed in the territorial waters for search and rescue. Now, let me tell you a little bit about this organization. It is headed by a director general who is in charge of day-to-day administration and operations. He reports to the council and the technical committee. Now, the council comprises cabinet secretaries. It is chaired by the CS in charge of interior and national coordination. It has the CSs for defense, Treasury, Transport, Agriculture, Environment. It even has the Attorney General, the Chief of Defense Forces, the Inspector General of Police, and of course the Director General himself. It's in charge of overall policy leadership. And then there's a technical committee, which now has the PSs from those respective ministries, also chaired by the PS for Interior, which is why you saw Esther Koimet being sent there, because she's the PS in Transport. So the DG of this organization reports to the council and the technical committee. This is the organization that would be responsible for a search and rescue. So, exactly what happens when you are in a moment of distress? Now that we know who is responsible for a search and rescue effort, well, this is what happens. First of all, the coxswain, that's what is called the driver of a ferry, for example, is the one who would be responsible for sending out a distress signal. It's called a global maritime distress signal. Now, they would use two channels. One is channel 12, which is shorter, and one is channel 16. That distress signal sent from channel 16 goes all the way to international waters, all the vessels that are there. It also goes right up to DOD, the Inspector General of Police. That signal is received by all of these bodies. But then, that signal, most importantly, goes to this center, which does exist in this country and is located in Mombasa within the Kenya Maritime Authority. It's called the Maritime Regional Rescue Coordination Center. Now, this center is what is responsible for ensuring prompt receipt of those distress signals and disseminating it to the right body that is responsible. So, is it an oil leak? You know who to call. Is it a fire on board? You know which resources to mobilize. Is it, for example, pirates have taken a ship hostage? You know exactly who to call. Or is it that the ship is sinking or the ferry is sinking? Then they kick in. And this is the point at which the Kenya Coast Guard services would kick in with their search and rescue operation. Now, they would do a couple of things before sending divers in. As you saw in Sam Gituku's story, sending divers in is something that is quite sensitive. So what do? They have these two techniques they use here. Sonar, which is basically the use of sound. You send out these signals and they're able to detect underwater vessels. They send back a signal in the form of echo. I think if you remember your basic physics in school. And then they send down what you have seen as those automated underwater vehicles, all those robots, which are able to go all the way up down to 6,000 meters below sea level. And they're therefore able to send pictures and send that back up. Once they have been able to locate where this vessel would be, they then send in the divers, and this is what we're seeing here. So this is typically what would kick in, and it's supposed to happen almost immediately upon sending out of a distress signal. Now, here's a couple of things that you need to understand about safety, especially for vessels like ferries. One, ferries are supposed to be dry docked, which is set aside from the water after 18 months. So every 18 months they're dry docked, the same way you fuel your vehicle, the same way you give overhaul and service to your vehicle. That's supposed to happen every 18 months. Now, on these vessels, there's obviously personal safety that we have highlighted, but then there's also safety of the vessel, which is ensured by a number of people who are supposed to be present on a ferry. You have a coxswain, who is the driver. You have deckhands, 4 of them who are in the front and the back. You have 4 personnel in the engine room. And then you have those who are in the gangway watch. Those are the ones who guide you as you're getting into the ferry and make sure that you are standing in the right place and that the vehicles have their engines switched off and the windows are drawn down and that there is no occupants in the vehicle until the ferry gets to its destination. Those are the ones who are supposed to send any information to the coxswain and say there's trouble here. Please send out a signal. Now, all of this equipment, all of this standard operating procedure, some of the questions you want to ask yourself in the wake of this tragedy and hopefully others that we hope would never happen again. Do we have this equipment? What is the involvement of the Kenya Coast Guard Service in this operation that is now not search and rescue, but search and recovery? Do we have personnel who are well trained? And do they have the right equipment? Also, are the ferries safe? Are they insured and therefore lawfully registered to be operating? Those are the questions to ask with regards to safety. And now you know the organization that is by law mandated to do a search and rescue. There's a well laid out standard operating procedure. Has that been followed? Those are the questions to ask now and going forward. That's our explainer tonight.